The story begins in the grim, battle-scared ruins of Leningrad.
The story of Vladimir Putin does not begin in a palace of gold or a hall of power. Instead, it begins in the grim, battle-scarred ruins of Leningrad. Now St. Petersburg, shortly after the Second World War. The city was a place of ghosts, a city that had barely survived one of the most horrific sieges in human history. Putin's parents were survivors of this trauma. His mother had narrowly escaped death by starvation, and his father had been severely wounded, carrying the physical and mental scars of the front lines for the rest of his life. They lived in a communal apartment, a communalka, where multiple families shared a single kitchen and a cold, dark hallway. There was no hot water, and the building was infested with rats. It was in these shadows that a young Vladimir learned his first and most important lesson in survival. He spent his days hunting those rats with a wooden stick. One afternoon, he cornered a particularly large rat at the end of a corridor. With nowhere to run, the rat did not cower. It lunged at his face with a desperate, feral ferocity. Putin realized then that a cornered enemy is the most dangerous kind. He vowed that he would never allow himself to be the one trapped in a corner. To ensure he was always the predator and never the prey, he began training in judo and sambo. He wasn't the tallest boy or the best student, but he was the toughest fighter in the neighborhood. The shadow of the KGB. Even as a teenager, Putin was fascinated by the world of shadows. He watched Soviet films about heroic secret agents who could move through the world unseen, pulling the strings of history. At the age of 16, he walked into the local KGB office and asked to join. They told him to study hard and get a degree first. Driven by a singular focus, he studied law at Leningrad State University, understanding that to control a system, one must first understand its rules. In 1975, he finally realized his dream and joined the KGB. He was trained to be a human intelligence officer, a man who could find the weaknesses in others and use them. By the mid-1980s, he was stationed in Dresden, East Germany. He lived a disciplined, quiet life as a mid-level officer, gathering information on the enemies of the Soviet state. But the world he served was about to vanish. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. An angry mob surrounded his office, demanding the secrets kept inside. When Putin called for military support, the voice on the other end of the line told him, "Moscow is silent." That silence was the most painful sound of his life. He felt betrayed by his country's leaders. As he burned boxes of secret documents in a furnace, he promised himself that Russia would never be weak or silent again. The rise to power, the man with no face. When Putin returned to Russia, the country was in total collapse. The Soviet Union had dissolved, and the streets were ruled by crime and poverty. However, a small group of oligarchs were becoming billionaires by stealing the nation's resources. Putin found work in the St. Petersburg mayor's office, becoming the Gray Eminence, the man who could solve any problem quietly. By the late 1990s, he moved to Moscow. The aging and ill President Boris Yeltsin needed a successor who would protect the elites. They looked at the quiet former spy and thought he was someone they could control. They were wrong. In 1999, after a series of mysterious apartment bombings terrified the nation, Putin, then Prime Minister, vowed to waste the terrorists. His hardline stance and tough guy image were exactly what the Russian people, tired of chaos, were looking for. On December 31, 1999, Yeltsin resigned, and the spy became the president. The vertical of power and the new czar. Putin did not want to lead a democracy. He wanted to rebuild an empire. He created the vertical of power, a system where every decision from the smallest village to the largest city flowed through him. He tamed the oligarchs by force. Those who didn't obey him were either sent to Siberian prisons or forced to flee the country. He seized control of the television networks, realizing that if he controlled the story the people saw, he controlled their reality. The Russian people were given a deal. Give up your political freedom in exchange for stability and a better economy. With oil prices rising, life did get better for many. Putin was seen as a hero, riding horses, swimming in ice-cold water and flying fighter jets. He began to see himself as a modern-day czar, chosen by history to restore Russia's pride after the humiliation of the 1990s. The isolation of the king. As the years turned into decades, the circle of people around Putin grew smaller. He became obsessed with the history of the Russian Empire, spending hours reading about Peter the Great and Catherine the Great. He grew to believe that Ukraine, Georgia, and other former Soviet states were not real countries, but lands that belonged to Russia. In 2008, he invaded Georgia. In 2014, he seized Crimea. Each time, the world's response was weak, which only fueled his belief that the West was decadent and afraid. During the global pandemic, he became even more isolated. He lived in a bubble of extreme security, sitting at the end of famously long tables, far away from his advisors. He only heard the echoes of his own thoughts. In February 2022, he took his ultimate gamble. He ordered a massive invasion of Ukraine, believing the capital city of Kyiv would fall in 3 days. He believed the world would simply watch as he rewrote the map. He was wrong. The war became a meat grinder, consuming the lives of thousands of young Russians and turning the world against him. The final chapter, The Ghost of the Kremlin. Today, Vladimir Putin is a man who is back in that dark hallway of his childhood. He has spent 25 years in power, and he knows that in the system he created, there is no such thing as a peaceful retirement. He has changed the constitution so he can rule until 2036, but he lives in a world of fear and shadows. He has imprisoned or killed his rivals like Alexei Navalny, but he cannot kill the truth of a failing war. His legacy was meant to be one of restoration, but it is becoming one of destruction. He wanted to bring Russia together, but he has isolated it from the modern world. He started as a boy hunting rats, and he may end as a man trapped in a palace of his own making. Watching the clock tick down on the empire, he tried to build with blood and iron. History will remember him not as the savior he dreamed of being, but as the man who brought the world to the edge of the abyss. Thank you for staying with us throughout this deep dive into the history and psychology of one of the world's most controversial figures. If you found this story compelling and informative, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of those who shape our world.